So here we are, just for the sake of it. I don't know when this will be released, but it's Thursday morning, July 1st. And the Supreme Court this morning released two cases. Well, there might have been more, but two that are important. The first of which was a 6-3 decision upholding Arizona's, a couple pieces of Arizona's voting laws. One that prohibits ballot harvesting, and that's basically anyone who's not a family member or a caregiver collecting ballots and then turning them in. So the Supreme Court said, nope, can't do that. Can't do the ballot harvesting. And the second piece was, if you cast a ballot in the wrong precinct, then it doesn't count. If you do election day voting and you're in a county that does a precinct system, if you go to the wrong precinct and vote, then it's not going to count.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Now, that's probably less of an issue going forward because most, at least in Maricopa County, I'm not sure what the other counties, because I don't have firsthand knowledge, but in Maricopa County, the last couple of elections, it's been voting centers.
Yeah.
So, because there's so much voting that happens early in Arizona. I mean, we have more than 80% of our votes cast by early ballot. Now, they're not necessarily all early because there are a lot of people like me who get an early ballot and then hold on to it and drop it off on election day at a polling place. And so it doesn't get counted until...
Do you ever miss standing in a booth voting?
You know, that's a good question. I went with my daughter. This was the first time she was able to vote.
With the black
2020.
pen.
Yeah. And she went to an early voting site, and I went in with her, and I did not miss it. Because you forget until you see the ballot. Every year I forget how many things there are to vote for in a general election ballot.
Yeah. And how long it takes.
Because you have all the judges, all the retention votes for judges, you have whatever local initiatives, national, state initiatives, the state legislature, the school board. I mean, some years we've had like 9 or 10 statewide initiatives on the ballot.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. It takes time. If you go stand in line and vote on election day, you're going to be standing in that voting booth for not an insignificant amount of time.
Yeah, at least 30 minutes if you care.
Right. Yeah, some people. I mean, we do know that a lot of people only vote for a couple things.
Yeah. So to what extent do you think ballot harvesting was a big issue in Arizona? Prior to 2016 is when you said that the law was passed.
I mean, it's definitely been a tactic of more of a tactic used by Democrats than Republicans.
Sure.
And that's
I guess I shouldn't say sure.
Well, they just happen to be more organized on, with unions and other natural constituents, government workers, those kinds of things. But the concern is that there is a potential for fraud when you have somebody who's a third party that's, there's and the Supreme Court talked about this. There is a potential of coercion and intimidation. Somebody shows up at a nursing home and says, "Here are your ballots, and here's how I want you to vote. I'm going to go take these," and that's a real issue. And I think the Supreme Court recognized that ballot harvesting does not discriminate against minorities.
Yeah,
I mean, everyone has and even Alito was the author of the decision. He points out that Arizona, it's very easy to vote in Arizona. Mm-hmm. And it really is. I mean, we have one of the loosest systems in the nation. There are some states where you cannot cast an early ballot without giving some kind of a reason why you can't vote on election day.
Yeah.
I mean, we have no excuse. We have no excuse voting. We got permanent early voter rolls. You get on there, you get the ballot mailed to you. So it's clearly the justices saw this as something that was important to prevent fraud and intimidation, and to keep a sense of security about the election. And then on the not voting in the right precinct, it turns out that 1% of Native Americans, 1% of Latinos, and 1% of African Americans had voted in the wrong precinct, where 0.5% of white voters voted in the wrong precinct. And so the case that was trying to be made was you're twice as likely, if you're a person of color, to vote in the wrong precinct. So that's why this is discriminatory. But that's 99% versus 99.5%.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, and so the justices said that's an absurd argument.
And my experience in that, because I believe that happened to me once, is that when you're voting in the wrong precinct and you're not on that precinct rolls, you're given a provisional ballot.
Well, first they'll say you're not on the rolls here. What's your address? You need to go to this precinct. And if you think that you're on there, then you can vote a provisional ballot.
Yeah, you can say no. I want a provisional. I can't do this. So
it doesn't disenfranchise.
So it doesn't disenfranchise anyone, right. but it solidifies the need that you vote in the area where you're designated.
Right. Then later in the day today, the Supreme Court handed down an even more consequential decision, and this was a case of nonprofit organizations in California, or doing activity in California. California passed a law that required disclosure of donors even to 501c3s, 501c4s, which is clearly a violation. I mean, that's not allowed at the federal level.
Yeah, but isn't 501c4, isn't that dark money?
Oh, yeah. Well, 501c3 is dark money.
Isn't that dark? Isn't this
dark
all
money.
in the
it's
dark?
All about dark money.
And we need to bring it all in the light.
Well, this
didn't
case,
we have a guest to talk?
Yes, we did. That? Yeah, and refer back to our episode with Lori Roberts, which we had a spirited and cordial debate. This case actually goes back to 2010. And back then, I happened to be involved in a organization that sent some money to California to a ballot initiative. And at the time, Kamala Harris was the Attorney General, and Jerry Brown was the governor, and Ann Revelle was the head of what they called the Fair Practices Political Commission, FPPC. And they were very alarmed when this money came into California against a tax increase. It's so alarmed that they immediately tried to demand who gave the money. And we said, that's not your business. We're a 501c4. We don't have to give that disclosure. And so it ended up going through a huge court case in California, culminating at a unanimous decision teleconference Sunday night at 11 p.m. California time. The California Supreme Court ruled against us and said, no, you have to disclose the donors or enter into a settlement with the AG and the FPPC. It was a complete miscarriage of justice because the tactic that the AG and the FPPC was using was that they were saying that we had to file a particular form. Well, the form under law was due January after the election. So that's the standard of any ballot initiative type things. So they were saying, you haven't filed this, so we're compelling you to file this form, even though it's not legally due until January. And the Supreme Court sided with them on that. So we ended up in negotiations, reached a settlement, but it exposed some very nefarious activity on the part of the government trying to delve into nonprofit organizations and who are the people giving money to those nonprofit organizations. So once that was codified, they started actually taking that information from nonprofits and putting it out in the public, even though they claimed that there was never, well, we'd never share this publicly. They shared 1,800 pages of IRS filings in public domain. So organization called Americans for Prosperity and Thomas More Freedom Center, I think, along with, get this, not only Americans for Prosperity, known as one of the Koch groups, group I've done some work with in the past, very conservative, obviously. But not only were they involved in this case, but other groups that sided with AFP and the right way to go on this was the ACLU and the NAACP. So here we have a great consensus of left and right saying, no, we need to have our First Amendment freedom. And the Supreme Court, with a 6-3 decision today, said, yeah, that's right. It's not appropriate for a state to require disclosure of donors to nonprofit organization.
Yeah, that's
a huge win.
It's a huge win, and it shouldn't even be a partisan issue.
And it wasn't. And it's being played that way in the media because the ACLU and the NAACP were not the plaintiffs, but they signed on to the case.
Yeah, they did an amicus brief. And listen, at the end of the day, we all play in the same sandbox, right? And the rules are the rules. And if someone tries to change the rules at the waking hour because it's not benefiting them, that's an issue. And that's a perfect example of what happened in this case is that the state of California obviously didn't like the fact that you were being successful.
Right.
Or other groups, outside groups, are being successful. And to require something like that, which violates individuals' First Amendment rights, and it's been codified now in law that when you give money to a candidate or to a cause, you are exercising your First Amendment rights.
Right.
You are exercising a right to speech, and on some levels, that speech is worth being private.
Right.
Because of what you're saying, it just reminds me of what just happened several weeks ago with ProPublica, publishing the tax returns, which are supposed to be private, of some of the country's largest billionaires.
Yeah.
And so we're back into this, and that's why this decision is really timely, because this could bite ProPublica and whoever gave them that information, bite them pretty cleanly.
I think so.
Because there is a right to privacy in our republic, and for whatever reason, weaponizing IRS data, 501c3 data, C4 data, seems to be the focus and the mantra of the left.
Yeah.
And yet the right could do the same thing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make it right or correct either.
Exactly. I mean, it is the First Amendment, and it applies to everybody.
Yeah.
Regardless of your political leanings.
Yeah.
I mean,
and so it brings back memories of Lois Lerner and weaponizing the IRS back in the Obama days and against conservative groups, which was illegal, and nothing happened to her.
Yep.
And yet if the same thing had happened under a Trump IRS,
oh my gosh,
it would have been the front page news for years. And it would have been the Russians. The Russians are looking into our IRS data and doing what they're doing. So it's a really important decision. And what's even more important is that the 6-3 conservative majority, and there's been a lot of question whether John Roberts, where he would be on these issues. The fact that he came along and understood the importance of this and the logic behind it was a good thing.
Well, and it was
on both fronts,
and it was disappointing that it wasn't more than 6. At least, I mean,
you think Breyer should have seen the logic?
On the First Amendment case, I would have expected that.
Yeah.
Even Kagan and Sotomayor, because this is a nonpartisan issue. It's the First Amendment. So, I feel like the liberal justices had to look the other way a little bit on their own philosophy. I've only skimmed the dissent.
Who wrote the dissent?
Kagan.
Kagan on the California case.
Oh, good question. I can't remember now. I'll have to look at it.
Yeah.
Kagan wrote the dissent on the Arizona case.
Okay.
But I think that I'll have to go back and look at them carefully, and I encourage anyone to go to SCOTUS blog and look at these cases directly because, one, it's always great reading.
Yeah.
These people are talented people. I mean, Alito's a great writer. not as good as Scalia was. But Kagan and Sotomayor are very smart and witty and can write pretty biting stuff as well. So it's always an education to go read Supreme Court decisions.
Yeah.
Without question. So it's kind of in the weeds, but you want to know stuff that matters. It's Supreme Court decision.
Well, it's always interesting this time of year amongst us politicos, so to speak, because this is the 2 or 3 week season of monumental Supreme Court decisions, and how we all parse
because they always, for whatever reason,
decisions for whatever reason.
The big cases they hold till right at the end. So here it is, the day after
And next year's Supreme Court is going to be really interesting. For the first time in a generation, they're taking up a Second Amendment case. There's several abortion cases that they're taking. And, Clarence Thomas has been very critical of the court along these lines of saying, we have lifetime appointments, and yet we're not taking consequential cases because we're afraid of the repercussions of our own decisions.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think
the social repercussions, not just the political.
Right. And I think Alito has alluded to that. He gave a speech somewhere, and maybe it's even been in a couple of writings in dissents where it's like, guys, we have an obligation to take on the big issues and make these decisions. So,
I mean, we haven't had a Second Amendment case since Heller.
That's right.
And that codified the Second Amendment as the law of the land, even with people who are living in Washington, D.C.
Right.
You can own a gun.
Itself. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Because going outside without one probably isn't a good idea sometimes.
Right. So now that the term is over for the Supreme Court, watch for those on the left to be putting a lot of pressure on Breyer to retire so that Biden can pick a younger, more liberal justice before he leaves office.
Or he picks President Obama.
Well, like I said, younger and more liberal.
I'm just saying that's the tea leaves that everyone is really reading.
That would be fascinating.
Those are the big tea leaves. That's what.
Well, and
my understanding is that's what he wants. He wants to be
Supreme Court justice.
He wants to be Supreme Court justice.
Wow.
He wants to be Chief Justice.
Well, he's not going to get that anytime soon.
So, that's how you pack the court then. Yeah. Then it becomes a whole different issue.
Well, and I think that the packing the court, because it's a 50-50 Senate, that's obviously not really in the cards at this point. But Biden is running out of time to put through an agenda because, we've got an election coming up next year, and there's a chance that Republicans take the Senate back.
Well, and we've talked about this before. I mean, you have to be able to count. And right now, everything in the Senate is so focused on Manchin and Sinema, and that's great. More power to them. But you've got 6 other senators sitting on the sidelines saying, take the arrows for us because we don't want to have to vote on this. And there's you've got New Hampshire senator, both Virginia senators, Tester in Montana. I mean, nobody, they're just slunked in their offices saying we don't, And they were all out backslapping last week when the infrastructure bill was announced.
Yeah.
And then torpedoed within 4 hours by the president.
But then it came back, right? I mean,
I don't think it's back. I think there's enough influential senators on the right and the left who now don't want to sign on.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how because obviously the liberals want this to be a 2-part deal where you get the bipartisan infrastructure deal, and then you cram all the stuff you didn't get in the bipartisan deal into reconciliation.
Then you screw everything else into a square hole.
But that'll be. I'm not certain they can get the 50 votes plus Kamala to get.
I think it's going to be really. I mean, the reconciliation is going to be really hard. I think you're looking at a government shutdown, one way or the other. I think you're looking at Mitch McConnell slowing things down.
Can you imagine a government shutdown when they control everything? Is that possible?
I think they'll come September, October.
They'll do a CR.
Yeah, there might be a CR with no tax increases or anything else. But I think to your point,
and the CR is continuing resolution.
Yeah, continuing resolution to keep everything status quo.
Yes.
But a reconciliation bill of that magnitude, with as many people are up for election next year, with the tax increases that are in there, including the elimination of the step up in bases for death taxes. And they are death taxes. Yep. You are taxed on your death after you've paid as many taxes you paid during your life. The government comes calling again. Doesn't matter who you are. And so they want to eliminate that. And they want to increase the capital gains tax to 45%, which would destroy capital investment in America as we know it. Because most countries, including our European allies, don't have a capital gains tax. Right. And they have a minimal corporate income tax.
Yeah.
And I made a comment to somebody the other day. You know, it might come down in terms of the global minimum tax that they're talking about, that the Irish save the world yet again.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't look like Ireland is going to go for anything.
I wouldn't expect.
And because they have benefited so much over the last 20 years because of their flat corporate tax, which is about 12%.
Yeah, and what they're talking about is a 25% for international, or is it 15?
15.
15.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts, and Congress only has like 24 days scheduled between now and the end of the year. They've got August recess coming, which everyone
and I think that
doesn't like going home, so they all go on their little trips.
And I think their challenge is, if they're going to try to get reconciliation done, it has to be.
Well, the budget's due by September 30th, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything needs to be signed, sealed, and delivered. And so they're either going to do a CR that...
We also have a debt ceiling issue.
We have a debt ceiling issue that's becoming more acute within the next 30 days. Everything that's old is new again.
That is right.
And I'll keep making the same argument. Biden needs to learn how to count.
Yeah.
And he's going to have to backpedal on a lot of this stuff, because you're not going to get a Shaheen, a Tester, any of the Virginia senators, or even a Mark Kelly, I think, who's going to have a bear of a re-election next year, signing on to the largest tax increase in American history. That would be political suicide.
Yeah, agreed. So that was a rant.
That was a rant, and it's Supreme Court, taxes. Music got me all fired up.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. Oh, and we should say this is our first Independence Day as a podcast.
It is,
and so we want to wish everyone a happy Independence Day. I say that not. I'm fine with saying Happy 4th of July, but it's Independence Day.
It's Independence Day. And make no mistake, this country was founded on faith, freedom, and free enterprise.
That's right.
Make no mistake.
No mistake. All right. Thanks, everybody.
God bless America.